Terry,
Yeah.
it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out. My first question to you is about COVID, and I know we're getting tired of talking about it, but how did you get through that time period, and how has it changed the way that you do things now?
Um, yeah, that's really a good question, Joe. The pandemic's affected all of us, but I was already working remote before the pandemic, and so I'm starting my 12th year now with Morgan James, and so as an acquisitions editor with a New York publishing house. So I've been working for them for all these years, and the pandemic was hard on Morgan James, even as you can imagine. I mean, bookstores closed, book distribution places closed. I mean, all kinds of crazy things happen. I mean, as a publishing house, we had 175,000 books that were returned. I mean, that's like $2.5 million worth of books.
Yeah.
So, but the good news is the company's survived. I mean, we're back up to our pre-pandemic production levels. Everything's perking real well, but yeah, there's some big crises that we had to go through and figure out how to survive. I work remote here, so I wasn't involved in all the day-to-day details with those books returned, but I'm sure just figuring that out was a big issue for us.
So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis. And to do that, I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third grade students. It's career day. And one of the kids is curious and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer him?
What I do is I work in book publishing, and I'm involved on a number of different levels. I write books. I've written all kinds of books through the years and published with different people, but I also, as a part of what I do, I'm an editor, an acquisitions editor, which is really on the front end of the process, which means I hunt and find the authors and the books that we publish. So I look at a lot of stuff and talk with a lot of authors about their books to see if it's the right kind of thing for us to publish at Morgan James. And that's what I do day in and day out. I'm involved with books.
So, what did you want to be in the third grade? Was your dream always writing and being in the book industry?
No, I think I don't really know what I wanted to do back in the third grade as I think about it. I mean, it probably changed all the time. My father was a railroad executive, and so I knew about railroads. I come from a long line of teachers, and so I'm sure I thought about teaching back then. But no, it was really in high school that my English teacher encouraged me to work on the high school newspaper, and that's really where I started in the whole writing realm of things. And then I went to Indiana University. I majored in journalism at one of the top 10 journalism schools in the country. I thought that's what I was going to do. I was going to, work at the Chicago Tribune or the Indianapolis Star or one of those kind of places. But halfway through my sophomore year in college, um, I had this crazy experience. I was writing on the campus newspaper. We had about 100 on our writing staff, and we produced a full size newspaper, 6 days a week, 7 days a week. So it was a pretty big deal. There were like 30 of us that were sitting there at my old Royal typewriter in the pre computer days, and I couldn't get my fingers on the right keys. And back then, if you made a mistake, what you did, you backed up and just X'd it out and went on. And I thought, oh my goodness, my editor is going to be screaming at me. They're going to be very unhappy with my copy. And so I kept muttering to myself as I typed. I said, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. And this little blonde haired girl that was sitting next to me turned to me and she said, "Oh, Terry, don't say that, because one of these days when you really need Jesus, you'll call out for him and he won't be there." And I thought, what's this? I'm a Christian. I go to church when I'm at home. I read the Bible in church when I'm at home. I had no relationship at all, Joe, but she encouraged me to go down to a little bookstore a couple blocks off the Indiana campus. They had pretty cards and posters, and maybe I'd find a book that interested me. So I wandered down there a couple days later, and I bought this book called Jesus the Revolutionary. I thought, how in the world could Jesus be a revolutionary? And I read that book, and it showed me a different side of Jesus than I'd ever seen before. And about that time, some people invited me to a Jesus people gathering in downtown Bloomington, and people were sitting on little scraps of carpet, little candles lit, and those people had something that I didn't have. And so I got a Bible, and I changed the direction of my life back then. And so instead of becoming a journalist, I joined a group called Wycliffe Bible Translators. I spent 17 years working with them. There's a New Testament that's up here on my shelf in southwestern Cachiquel from Guatemala that wouldn't have existed if I hadn't have made those choices. And then I wandered back to my writing, and that's kind of where I've been ever since, writing books and writing for magazines and all that kind of thing.
What was the first thing that you wrote that you got a response from somebody that was very favorable that made you think, I got this. I'm a good writer. I can do this.
I think even in high school, I started sending some articles to publications, and one of those I remember got accepted, in like a teenage magazine, and so it made me think, hey, maybe I could be writing this stuff and getting it out there and getting it published. Um, so I did a lot of magazine writing early on in my writing days. I'm still writing for magazines. I encourage people to do that because you can reach far more people with a magazine article than you ever can with a book.
Yeah.
And so I was writing for magazines, and I went to a writers conference, and I was talking to an editor, and she said, Terry, I got a problem. And I always listen when these editors tell me whatever their problem is. And she said, she was working at David C. Cook, and she says, look, I've got all these books, and part of our mission statement is that we're supposed to help children learn about what is happening out there in the world. And we don't have a single book that does that. So what kind of ideas do you have? And back then I was reading books to my kids, and I knew that Stephen Lawhead had this series of books called Howard Had. Howard had a spaceship, Howard had a hot air balloon, all this kind of stuff. And these books combined a real series of real pictures with a cartoon character to show kids, to help them get into the story and that kind of thing. And so I said to this editor, what if we took real pictures combined with a cartoon character to show kids that they could do anything with their life? And so I wrote this little book called When I Grow Up, I Can Go Anywhere for Jesus. That was my first book that was published in 1992. Combined real pictures with a cartoon character to show kids that all kinds of things are possible with their life. They just need to be aware of the opportunities that are out there.
So what about heroes? Who's been kind of a hero or an inspiration for you in your life?
Oh, there are a lot of heroes, and I've had the amazing opportunity, because I've interviewed more than 150 best-selling authors, Joe. I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of these people that are my heroes, and to sit with them and talk. I can think of I worked for Billy Graham years ago, so I've actually met Mr. Graham. I've written a couple of books on Luis Palau, and who's another evangelist. I met Chuck Colson, or I did a youth book on Chuck Colson. So I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of these people and sit with them, find out how they do what they do, what makes them tick, all that kind of thing.
What's been kind of the common thread that you figured out with a lot of these authors that you've interviewed? A lot of people that are big personas that we all know about. What's something that you learned about all these people that might be kind of a through line, something that's kind of synonymous with all of them?
Yeah, I guess one of the things I've learned is that they're all, I mean, even though some of them are some very, very important people, they're all just regular folks
Yeah.
at the end of the day. Like even the best-selling pastor Chuck Colson, or no, Chuck Swindoll told me, he said, Terry, even all of us, we put our pants on one leg at a time. We're like a bunch of guys in the back of a pickup truck trying to get our stuff together. So all these people have they have things that are good, things that are bad in their lives. They're different because they figure out how to persevere and rise above whatever kind of crisis they have in their life. And that's a journey that I think that all of us are on with our life, whether we're famous or ordinary, I guess is the way I look at it.
So, what is if you could meet one person right now that you haven't met, whether they're a writer or otherwise, that you would love to just meet and sit down and talk with, who would that be?
Oh, I don't nobody's ever asked me that. So I'm sort of stymied in some ways, but I've met a lot of I've met a lot of really well-known people through the years,
Yeah.
and had that kind of opportunity to talk with them. So I don't know that I'm really hungering to meet anyone at the
Okay.
moment.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. So, what is your motivation every day to wake up and to do the work that you do? You're really helping people launch careers, you're helping stories get out into the world, but you also write and you have to evolve as a writer and a person yourself. What's that collective energy every day for you?
Yeah, I think the collective energy goes back to that little story I told you about Jesus the Revolutionary and how that book changed my life. I understand that books change people's lives, and I know that firsthand because a book changed my life. So I get up every day and I work in this business, and there's a lot of stuff coming out. I mean, there's over 11,000 new books that come out every day. People don't realize just the glut of material that's out there. And so authors have to be doing something to be telling people about their book and working at it. I was unaware of all that kind of stuff for a long time. I guess the wake up call that I had was in 2007. I was a literary agent back then. I lived in Arizona. Had a little literary agency, and Mark Victor Hansen, who's the co-author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, invited me to come to his conference out in Los Angeles called Mega Book Marketing University. I went out there. I took pitches from people during the conference, but I sat there with 400 people and I listened to all this stuff about the book business. And back then, I'd written about 50 books for traditional publishers, but they weren't really selling out there, Joe. That was my problem. Publishers give advances, and if your book doesn't make back that money, sell. In other words, you get a negative royalty statement from that publisher a couple of times a year. So I was getting negative royalty statements on my books, and but during that conference, it's like I woke up because I understood that I wasn't doing anything to get my book out there and tell people about it. I mean, publishers were making pretty books, they were getting them in the bookstores. I had a terrywhalen.com website, but I wasn't blogging. Social media hadn't really started. I didn't have a newsletter list. I didn't do any of these kinds of basic things that authors need to do. So I one of the speakers during this conference was Jack Canfield, the other co-author on Chicken Soup for the Soul. And Jack has this book called The Success Principles that was a New York Times bestseller about what it takes to be successful. And the very first success principle in that book is that I will take 100% responsibility for my own success. Now, none of us want to take 100% responsibility. We want somebody else to do it. We want some editor, some publisher, somebody else to help us be successful. But I decided at that event that I was going to take 100% responsibility for my own success. So I started blogging. I have over 1,700 entries in my blog on the Writing Life. I found an article about a year ago that said I was one of the top 27 content producers out there. I mean, there was Seth Godin and Ryan Holiday, and they had my name in there for some reason and all that. But it's because I have a large volume of material that's out there, and I keep working at it. And what I tell people is that, hey, if I did it, you can do it too. It's not all that hard, but it's basically a matter of getting up every day and deciding that you're going to do something. and then doing it. It's that simple.
Absolutely. So, in your life as a writer specifically, what's some of the best advice you've ever gotten?
I guess some of the best advice I've gotten is that really we need to keep just keep at it. As writers, we get rejected a lot. We hear no an awful lot, but uh, all we're trying to do is get somebody to say yes. And so basically, you have to have that kind of mindset that it's not about you, and it's not you that they rejected. It's that it wasn't really the best fit. So you've got to keep going no matter what happens to you.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of friends that have been rejected all over the place, and I keep getting rejected as a writer, but yet I know that there is an opportunity for me out there. I just have to keep going, and there's a lot that I can't fix in the world. I can't really know how somebody else is going to respond, whether they're going to accept it, whether they're going to reject it, what they're going to do. The only person that I can really do anything about is me. And so I have to keep going no matter what happens. And I think those are some of the real great lessons that I've learned along the way.
So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into that young version of you at Indiana U, going into journalism, the world's opening up for you, and you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've led, the wisdom you've gained along the way. What advice would you impart on that young version of you?
I guess I would say that the world's a big place with lots of opportunity out there. I mean, I've heard I've heard Marcus Duhey, who just stepped back from being the CEO at Penguin Random House, say that we live in one of the greatest times in human history since
Yeah.
Gutenberg invented the printing press.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's lots and lots of opportunity out there. So don't get discouraged from the rejection and the no's that you get. You just keep going till you can find the yes out there, and it's definitely out there for you.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Of all of these things that you've done and accomplished and evolved into in your life, what are you ultimately the proudest of?
Oh, I'm very proud of a lot of things that have happened over the years. So I don't know if one is over another. I guess one of the main things that I'm telling people about these days, and like one of the reasons we're doing this podcast is I'm really proud of this book that I did called 10 Publishing Myths.
Yeah.
And my friend Jerry Jenkins, who's been on the New York Times list 21 times, wrote the forward for this book. And basically, the reason I'm proud of this book is because the book is really all about author expectations. And I'm really trying to help authors have realistic expectations about what's going to happen in their book and in their lives. There's a lot in the whole publishing process. It's out of our control. Nothing we can do anything about. But what I tried to emphasize in this book is to help people realize that there are some real practical things that every author can do, whether you self publish or whether you publish with a traditional publisher. There are things that you can actually do yourself outside of whatever the publisher is going to do for you that will help you get your book out there and be successful. That's one of the reasons I'm really excited about this book. I want
Yeah,
people to know about it.
absolutely. And it's a great book. And the interesting thing is, in this modern world, we have coaches all over the place. It used to be that coaches were in sports or managers of baseball teams, but there's coaches all over. And that's really the kind of the function of your book. You're just coaching people through a process that for most of them is alien. They've never been through it before. But that's true. There's all these expectations. And instead of being downtrodden and despondent because they may get shattered, you're there to help them realize there's a realistic way of going about this process.
Absolutely. That's part of what I was doing, and that's why in every chapter I have I have an MBA, what I call a myth buster action, that a practical thing that they can do as an author to reach your readers and to succeed with their book.
So at the end of the day, in all these different capacities that you exist in, everybody sees you in a certain light, family, friends, clients, colleagues, everyone that reads your books, but you ultimately run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I just think I think I'm just a regular guy that that loves stories and loves helping other people get their message out there, and in all different kinds of ways, whether it's like this on a podcast, whether it's in a magazine article or a book. Um, I do that, and these books I've done are all over the world. I mean, it's pretty incredible. It's not just a United States thing, you know. I mean, I have authors in the UK and in Africa and Asia, all over the world. It's a big place that we live in, I guess.
Yeah, it certainly is. So I'm curious, kind of tapping into your adventure of writing and storytelling. If you could get into a time machine and go back in time and see one event in human history, what would it be? What would you love to have seen firsthand?
I guess I would have loved to have been there in the crowd when Jesus Christ walked the face of the earth, and to see the the feeding of the 5,000, or the this morning I was reading about Lazarus, for example, to see him buried in that tomb for 4 days, and then Jesus walk up and cry because his friend had died, but then tell him to come out.
Yeah,
I mean, that would be pretty incredible to
yeah.
witness something like that.
Absolutely. So if anyone wants to pick up your latest book about the 10 myths, any of your previous work, reach out, any of the good business, where's the best place to go?
Well, one of the best places to go is this little website that I have set up. They can go to publishingoffer.com, and that's where they can get this book for like $10, along with over $200 of bonuses. Uh, I also have an 11th myth, Joe, that they could get for free from me, and they can get that at terrylinks.com / 11th myth /11th myth. And that'll take you to a website where you could get that 11th myth. Because one of my friends, when I published this book, told me, they said, Terry, you're missing the 11th myth. I'm like, what's that? They said, well, that should be, if I send my book to Oprah, she'll book me on her show. And I'm like, yeah, that's a pretty good myth. And so I decided to write that myth, and really what the reality is. And we designed it to look exactly like the book. And so it's just a free gift that I give people to really learn more about this book.
Wonderful. Terry, again, thank you so much for sending me the book. It's a wonderful read. I appreciate what you do, your work. So keep doing the great work. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully we can help a lot of people with this whole podcast here.
Absolutely. We'll put it out there. I have no doubt. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.